In 2008, Sheila Fines and her husband noticed a message on the answering machine in their home.
My husband called and was informed over the telephone that Stuart had hanged himself.
He left a suicide note, but his family didn't receive it from the military for another 14 months. The military also messed up his death certificate, and his mother alleges failed to accept he had PTSD. The hearing heard from military witnesses who claimed to have done all they could to help Stuart Fines, but felt his real problem was alcohol and cocaine abuse, not PTSD. As the military deployment to Afghanistan stretched on and units made multiple deployments, the budget for mental health care for soldiers was boosted. But it's remained virtually unchanged for almost a decade. Even under growing evidence, a high number of returning soldiers are suffering from PTSD. The military says about 8% of them, but a former activist military ombudsman pegged that number much higher.
Those who suffer from PTSD are known as people trying to screw the department.
We're joined now by Sheila Fines, whose son Stuart took his own life after 10 years in the Army. He served in both Bosnia and Afghanistan. He died in 2008. Mrs. Fines, first tell me, what kind of person was your son?
Pre-Afghanistan, even pre-Bosnia, our son was happy. He was all things to do with the military. From the time he was 12, he wore a green uniform in one way or another. And he was a wonderful, happy young guy who was just really proud to be doing what he did.
So how did he change after he came back from Afghanistan then?
When he first came back from Afghanistan, he tended to withdraw from people outside of the people he had served with. He worked hard, he played hard, and he was actually quite successful for the first while when he came back. But he started to have bad dreams. That was the first sign that we saw. He broke off an engagement with a lovely young lady. He only wanted to be with the guys he had served with. Eventually it came to light that his dreams were becoming something a little more than that. He had night terrors, and he became quite withdrawn at first.
And he began drinking and using drugs.
Yeah, I think he was a typical soldier. They worked hard, played hard. He didn't use drugs at first. He was drinking, and it's not until much later on that I heard that he was drinking to excess.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the next question is, how did you find out about his death?
We received a call. We were out shopping.
Just a moment. You received a call. They phoned you.
Yeah, we received a telephone call. It was actually on our call display when we came home, and it said DND, and I knew what they were going to say. And
they didn't send an officer around to comfort you or a padre. They phoned you and said, your son is dead.
They told my husband on the phone that Stuart had been found hanging in his room, and later that evening they sent a team. Mm-hmm. And they outlined what was going to happen next.
Mm-hmm. There was also a suicide note.
Yes.
But the military didn't tell you about it until, well, tell me the story about the note.
It was about 15 months later, after Stuart's death, and they had just completed the Board of Inquiry. And my husband received a phone call at work from the president of the board, who said that he had something that we might like to see. And it turned out it was a suicide note. And at first they delivered a photocopy. And we asked to see, we wanted the original.
What difference would it have made to you had you had the note, you know, a day or two or shortly after his death?
Well, first of all, it would have been a very different kind of funeral. He had a full military funeral, and one of the things that he said on the note was that he wanted a small family funeral. It was our son's last communication with his family, and that hurt, that he wasn't important enough that anybody felt that we would like to know what he had to say.
Mm-hmm. Also, apparently there was a lot of confusion over the death certificate. That caused you a lot of trouble too. They had to change it many times or something?
They did. There were 4 versions in all, different versions of our son's death certificate, His death was registered incorrectly, and that took us a long time and a lot of work to have that fixed, and a lot of money as well. We had to go to court.
I think the public needs to know that you are not asking the government for any money. You haven't asked for a penny of compensation.
No.
So what is it you're hoping to achieve with this military process that you've started?
The hearing, our son had a board of inquiry, and we felt that it was a board that was put together, designed to absolve the military of any responsibility in our son's death and the events that came after. We were disappointed. We still have yet to actually receive that report or a debriefing. Then we started to inquire. We started to ask questions about how is it that our son came to be dead. And eventually that led to 3 separate investigations, only one of which we actually instigated. One was instigated by the military, one was instigated by the Military Ombudsman's Office. So we need to see that there's some change. We need to see that our son's death wasn't in vain. And until you admit a system is broken, you're not really going to make an effort to repair it.
There was all kinds of reason to know that your son was in trouble. The military could have seen that. It sure sounds like post-traumatic stress syndrome, but
yes.
Whether it was or not, he was a very sick man.
Yes.
After serving 10 years for Canadians, do you feel that his death was avoidable?
I absolutely feel it was preventable. They knew he was sick. He was in a hospital. Finally, he was starting to get some help, and they pulled him out of the hospital when they said that they would keep him. They ordered him back to the base. They had him live in the defaulters room. They set up very harsh conditions, and I think it pushed him over the edge. I think he was humiliated.
So, Mrs. Fines, I guess to put it finally,
yes.
You're looking for closure of some kind. That's what this is all about for you, right?
I don't think closure is a word I would use. I don't think we will ever have closure. What I'm looking for is an honest effort on the part of the military to, sorry, stop that.
Well, just to tell you what really happened and that they made a mistake and that they regret it, I guess. I'm sorry, in effect.
Yeah, I don't think it's in the military's mandate that they can say they're sorry, and I don't expect that will ever happen. What I do expect is that somebody has some accountability and will sit down with us and tell us, what are you going to do differently so that Stuart's story never becomes anybody else's story again?
That would be a good outcome.
That would be a great outcome.
Mrs. Fines, thank you very much. I know this is not easy for you, and we appreciate you telling this story, and maybe it'll help some other parents.
I hope so. Hope so. Thank you.
It's hard to connect this peaceful farmland near Prince George, British Columbia, with scenes of violence and death. But on September 10th, 2012, it turned into a killing ground. Overhead, an RCMP helicopter.
Day shift there. If we got the bird, it'd be sure nice to do some circles here and just see where that vehicle is.
What you're hearing is actual police radio from the day. This and 911 calls were obtained by W5 as part of this investigation. On the ground, officers from an RCMP emergency response team creep towards the cabin where the man they want to arrest is holed up. That man is Greg Matters. A former master corporal in the Canadian Army who served in Bosnia, Greg suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And everything the police are doing is just making it worse, especially the helicopter.
The latest info is that the helicopter freaked him out and he's gone back inside the residence.
Copy that. Helicopter freaked him out. We're 23 at the end of the driveway.
Greg's psychiatrist, Greg Passy.
For him, it would have been a trigger. It would have made his PTSD worse. He would have got more into his fight or flight mode. seeing individuals in camouflage uniform. Who knows what that brought him back to.
Greg is trapped, cornered in a small cabin. No way to escape. He knows the police are on his land, but he can't see them.
Zulu 51 from Zulu 50. Go ahead. Yeah, we've advanced up the driveway where we still got a bit of concealment here, and we're going to get some eyes on the res here. Copy that.
Eventually, Greg leaves the cabin with his dog, Moya, and approaches the police.
He has a small hatchet with him, small hatchet.
Officers later told investigators that Greg threatened them with this hatchet that was found on the scene.
Greg, we're here to help you. Just put down the hatchet.
What happened next was over in moments.
We got shots away, shots away. Shots.
Copy, shots fired.
It was such a shock. It was like none of it was necessary. He was alone on the farm, no firearms. Nobody was being threatened. They could have waited a month, could have starved him out, and he'd be alive today.
An autopsy concluded that Greg died from gunshot wounds to the chest. His mother, Lorraine, was devastated.
The lady mediator looked into the room and she didn't have to tell me. I said, "You've murdered my son."
Greg was the youngest of 3 siblings, grew up on the family farm, spent 15 years in the army, served as a peacekeeper in Bosnia, and came home with PTSD.
What were his issues when you first met him?
He clearly had post-traumatic stress disorder, all the classic signs, the nightmares, the anxiety, the panic attacks, all of those things.
He was a changed man, paranoid and short-tempered. That led to run-ins and threats of violence to the police. It was all made worse by a feud with his brother Trevor over the land they had bought together. It got so bad, they took out restraining orders against each other. It came to a head early in the morning of September 9th, 2012, when Greg chased his brother off his mother's property. Greg called 911.
911 for police, fire, and ambulance.
Hi there, I need police officers.
Okay, what's happening?
Brother came in here drunk in his vehicle, doing donuts in the yard, and I gave chase. I caught him down the road.
Over the next 2 hours, Greg calls 911 5 times. Each time, more agitated because police are not responding.
I'm just calling regarding an earlier call. Have they taken Trevor Matters?
You can't phone this number to get updates on the file. You'll have to phone the non-emergency police and leave a message for someone to get back to you.
Yeah, but nobody's leaving a message. Nobody's getting in touch with me. I don't know if he's en route.
They're very busy in Prince George City. You're going to have to wait.
Sensing Greg's frustration, the police dispatcher calls officers for more information.
He just called us on 911 for an update.
What's his update?
He doesn't have one. He wanted one from you guys.
Oh, don't worry, I got one coming for him.
10-4, he's kind of angry with us.
But the altercation with his brother takes an unexpected twist. Police now view Greg as the agitator, and they decide to arrest him. Suddenly, Greg, the man who asked police for help, has become their target. That evening, police arrive at the house where he lives with his mother. Lorraine says they asked Greg to meet them on the road.
And Greg did start to walk out to the road once, and he seen the police cars out here and came back and told me, "Mom, I'm so afraid. I can't walk out to the road. I'm scared to walk out there. Why would they call me out to the road?"
Confused and scared, he doesn't know what to do and turns to his mother for help.
I phoned the police station. They wanted Greg at the police station to arrest him.
Arrest him for what?
I still don't know what. And Greg spoke with them and he said, "No, I don't want to go into jail. I haven't done anything wrong."
But the police want to arrest him over his altercation with his brother. Greg's refusal to meet with them ratchets up the tension and sets off a train of events that would end in tragedy 26 hours later. Unseen by police, Greg leaves the house and heads for a cabin on the property.
Keep your eyes open out there, boys. We don't know where he's at right now. Kilo 2, he left the house in dark clothing. Mom has no contact with him right now. He's wandering around outside somewhere, just so you're aware.
This is his refuge, a quiet place he comes to when he's upset or needs to be alone. His mother tells police she'll find him and bring him to the station in the morning.
When you tell the police you'll bring him in the next morning, what do they say to you?
They weren't agreeing with it at first, but then they said, okay, do you promise? I said, I promise I will.
But what started as a minor incident is spinning rapidly towards its tragic conclusion.
What's going on exactly?
Long and short of it is that we're trying to get together a search warrant to go into the property and seize his truck and arrest the guy, but in all likelihood he's going to say, I'll shoot anybody that comes near the place, so don't be surprised if this is an ERT call by the end of the night.
Okay.
ERT, cops speak for the ERT, the Emergency Response Team. These officers, a heavily armed unit used in hostage takings and armed standoffs, backed up by other Mounties who surround the property. Police believe Greg has a gun. He doesn't. While police marshal their forces, Greg is still looking for a way out. He leaves a phone message for police saying he's waiting for his lawyer to make contact. Alone, frightened, and confused, he tries to reach his mother by cell phone.
Mom, can you call me? I'm getting a little worried, wondering where you are, what's going on. Are you okay?
But Lorraine isn't okay. When she tries to drive to the cabin to help Greg, the police arrest her.
He ran at me. He was a great big guy and told me to get my hands up on top of my car. And I said, I can't. My arms are injured. I have a neck injury. I cannot put my hands up. And he yelled at me several times to do that. And finally, he came and forced him up on top of my car. So he grabbed me by the scruff of my neck, and I was starting to fall to the ground because my feet got mixed up. And I did fall to the ground, so he just grabbed me by the scruff of my neck and pulled me on the gravel, on my back.
Dragged you?
Dragged me. And all the time I was asking him, why are you doing this?
A 66-year-old woman who says she was thrown to the ground, dragged by police. And there was more to come.
I was begging for them not to hurt my son. So when he dragged me, he put me in a sitting position and then took his knee and just drove me so hard in my chest that I didn't know if I'd ever get up off the ground.
Photos taken afterwards show torn clothes, swelling, and bruises. But her physical pain is nothing compared to her dread that something terrible is about to happen.
I was begging for my son's life then. I knew they were going to hurt him.
You had this feeling that...
Yes. I knew because the big fellow, when I was begging for my son's life, and he was just, he had no emotion. He was cold. He had no emotion. I was looking in his eyes saying, why are you doing this? Please don't hurt my son. And there was no emotion on his face.
Less than 2 hours later, Greg is dead.
I just don't understand how a domestic issue got so serious.
Greg's sister, Tracy, was in Australia when she got the news.
I don't understand why an emergency response team with men clad in armory from head to toe, in camouflage gear and a helicopter. It's just such an overreaction, why was it escalated to such a high degree? It does not make sense to me whatsoever.
It made no sense to the family. So many unanswered questions.
Next, pleading to prevent a tragedy.
You told the police he's a veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress.
They wouldn't listen to a word.
But ignored by authorities.
Our whole community has been shaken.
When W5 continues.
September 25th, 2013, Prince George, BC. A military ceremony in honor of Greg Matters. His mother Lorraine and sister Tracy received the Memorial Cross, a medal awarded to the families of soldiers who have died. Greg's best friend from the Army, Warrant Officer Ryan Seguin, here from Gagetown, New Brunswick, to present the medal.
It means that my buddy didn't die in vain, and the government recognizes his injuries that were caused in Bosnia.
Injuries in Bosnia, not physical, but mental post-traumatic stress disorder. And that led to tragedy back in Canada when he was killed by officers from the RCMP.
We got shots away, shots away.
It's an irony not lost on his sister, Tracy.
It's absolutely tragic. And to be killed by people that should really understand what servicemen and servicewomen go through. They were his, they were his brothers in a way, weren't they? Greg wanted to become an RCMP officer at one point in his life.
Within hours of Greg's death, officials from BC's newly formed, civilian-run Independent Investigations Office were on the scene.
Our job is to look at cases involving death and serious harm at the hands of police and determine whether or not an officer may have committed a criminal offense.
Greg Matters' death was the first case for Richard Rosenthal, the chief civilian director of the IIO. After a 7-month investigation, he issued his conclusions.
Well, I ruled that I had no reason to believe that the officers committed a crime, that it appeared that at the moment the shots were fired, that the shots were fired lawfully in self-defense.
You, however, were concerned about other aspects.
Certainly legitimate questions were raised about the decision-making process, about why it was deployed, about why the arrest was going to be made. And these are all decision points that were made that obviously ended up resulting in the death of Greg Matters.
Disturbing questions. Questions that prompted Rosenthal to send the case to the Commission for Public Complaints against the RCMP.
Whenever I see an issue that it's not necessarily criminal, but there are issues of conduct or tactics or policies or tactics, it is my responsibility as a public servant to make sure that the people who are making decisions in that regard have that information, know it's at issue, and have the ability to respond to it.
Police were not dealing with a hardened criminal here.
The Matters family hired lawyer Cameron Ward to handle their case with the Commission for Public Complaints.
They knew who he was, they knew what they were dealing with, and it seems to me a much more measured, calm, compassionate response would have been appropriate.
But instead of a calm, measured response to an incident involving a veteran known to have post-traumatic stress disorder, the RCMP deployed a heavily armed tactical unit. And there were other questions. Why did the officers in charge turn down offers of help from 3 people Greg Matters trusted? His mother, his psychiatrist, and a family friend. The first offer came from Greg's mom.
You told the police he's a veteran suffering from post-traumatic stress. You would think that the first thing they would do is say, you know what, maybe you could talk to him. Maybe the doctor could talk to him.
Nothing. I told them over and over and over again. They wouldn't listen to a word.
Not only would they not listen, when she tried to drive to Greg's cabin, she says they arrested her and threw her to the ground.
I was treated like a criminal.
You were charged?
They said that, yeah, I was being charged with assault.
Assault on who?
On the big 6'5" policeman, I guess, who assaulted me.
Lorraine made some serious allegations about how she was treated by police.
David Eby was legal counsel for the BC Civil Liberties Association before his election to the provincial legislature.
Isn't the mother an ally? Isn't the mother your friend as a police officer in this scenario? Isn't this someone who's on your side, who can help you de-escalate this situation? And it's pretty clear to me that she wasn't seen as such by the ERT.
The second offer of help came from Greg's psychiatrist, Dr. Passy. He got a call from the RCMP in the middle of the standoff.
At any time did the officer say, I'm going to give you a phone him and get involved in this?
No, no. And I didn't really get a chance to ask again. I thought we were going to be able to talk a little bit longer, and then she says, oh, it sounds like we're able to negotiate for him to come out. I'll get back to you shortly. I think it's going to be okay. And so she hung up. I waited.
But the RCMP never phoned back. The third offer of help came from Valerie Penko, a family friend who lives nearby. She called Lorraine, but Greg had his mother's cell phone.
And I said, Greg, we have to do something about this situation. And he said, okay. He said, I'll come into town with you, but I want to go in with you, and I don't want lights and sirens.
So Greg is offering to go to the police station with you?
With me.
Valerie tried to drive to Greg, but the Mounties stopped her.
I said, I told Greg I'd be picking him up in 5 minutes. And Greg offered to walk out because he had his dog Moya. And this guy said, no, you can't go down there.
Did you hear the shot ring out?
Oh, you bet.
What went through your mind?
I was stunned. The cop was standing here with me, and we were just chit-chatting. And I heard that shot, and I said, is that what I think it is? And he kind of nodded his head.
If they would have let Valerie go up there and take Gregory, to see what was going on to the police station,
we wouldn't be here.
You wouldn't be here.
The RCMP refused W5's request for an interview about the events leading up to Greg Matter's death, saying that the case was the subject of an upcoming coroner's inquest, as well as an investigation by the Commission for Public Complaints against the RCMP. But Greg's family has little faith that their case will get a fair hearing from any of these bodies.
Why is it you have no trust in the Public Complaints Commission?
Well, I believe it's a situation where the RCMP will be investigating the RCMP. From what I've heard from other cases, it's one of the most unsatisfactory processes under these circumstances.
She's talking about 2 separate shootings in 2009 involving emergency response teams in northern BC. In each case, a coroner's inquest made recommendations to the RCMP. Better training, better communication. Nothing appears to have changed.
3 shooting deaths at the hands of the ERT. What does that say to you about what's going on up there?
Well, anytime that there is a shooting death, I think that it's critical that we look at the case and say, could this have been prevented? What can we learn from that? And that system is broken in British Columbia. The coroner's inquest process routinely makes recommendations about training, communication, etc., that are ignored, brushed over. There's no closing of the loop between the recommendation made by the inquest juries working hard to prevent similar deaths in the future and the police, and that's a big issue.
For Greg's family, the issue is more personal, and they believe it has undermined public confidence in the RCMP.
Our whole community has been shaken. It's been shaken, and Greg was well loved by everyone that knew him. And people are frightened now of the RCMP. Very frightened.
Greg's final resting place is this cemetery in Prince George. Lorraine and Tracy come here to reflect on Greg's life and what he could have been. At the time of his death, he had signed up to take courses in psychology. Greg wanted to help others who suffer from PTSD. He never got that chance.
The inquest into the death of Greg Matters begins this week in Prince George. But the inquest jury can only rule on the cause of death and make recommendations to prevent a future tragedy. They cannot point a finger of blame. We'll be right back.
Oh, it's starting to come to the wall. Let's check the walls. You want to go up there? All right, get up, buddy. Oh, who did that one? All right, boys. Who's that? Yeah, we'll have to take it back there. Watch it,